That's a lot of poop, dude. What the fuck did this person eat? That's so much poop. Oh my God, look at all that poop. A lot of people really don't like the Callisto protocol. When I say they really don't like it, I mean they really don't like it.
For starters, this is one of those games that has you crawling through vents and squeezing through tight gaps, over and over.
Callisto Protocol is everything that the trailers said it would be, but even that beauty is undermined by shoddy performance on PC.
Callisto Protocol is flat out unfun. Tense atmosphere and some cool enemies does not make up for a game that never feels like it's actually working right.
People I look up to as reviewers have said it's not worth it, both ACG and SkillUp, but I really wanted to check it out for myself and see what it had to offer. You see, I'm a Dead Space fan. I liked all three of them. I remember playing the original Dead Space back when I was way younger than I am now, and it being one of the only horror games that I actually enjoyed. I'm not really a horror game enjoyer to begin with, but the mix of sci-fi and action and horror and discovering hidden truths and stories, it was just so good. So when I heard that a good number of the original team that worked on Dead Space was making a game that was, by all intents and purposes, the exact same sort of thing, I just had to play it regardless of what anyone else said or what I was told to expect going in. I heard two major gripes: that the FPS was horrible and there were many hitching issues and stutters, and that the dodge system was terrible and awful and bad for the experience of the game. I didn't get a press code, which ended up being a good thing in this case, as the first major complaint was fixed within 24 hours after the game launched. The FPS issues have been solved, the stuttering is gone, at least for me, and the game seemed to run perfectly fine post-patch. Hooray. So really, I guess the question is now, what did I personally think about the Callisto Protocol? The game starts story-wise with you, Jacob Lee, being a pilot tasked with delivering goods to a planet called Callisto, specifically a prison, with your co-pilot in tow. This is your last run and you're going to make it big, being able to retire after this last trip and move on with your life and go do what you want. Your co-pilot is apprehensive and honestly sort of a Debbie Downer, but it doesn't matter and you go through with the trip because hey, it's just cargo after all. Halfway through the intro, you're boarded and a bunch of space pirates try to steal whatever it is you're hauling, looking for something that becomes clear later on, eventually causing you to crash from the damage they've inflicted on the planet you're tasked with delivering said cargo to. The people who run the prison rescue you, but end up being total dicks, making you an inmate and telling you to give up your former life and that you live here now, so tough titties, deal with it. Unfortunately for everyone, there's a big outbreak of a virus that turns everything into flesh and tentacle monsters, with chaos and mayhem sown about that allows you to escape. The story takes you through the steps of figuring out what's going on, who's involved, and what the virus specifically is, and eventually the idea of escaping, as nobody wants to be on Callisto anymore since it's kind of a bummer and everybody is dying. Straight up, the game will only in total give you about 8 to 12 hours of playtime. This isn't bad if the story is solid, and I'll say I personally enjoyed it. If you're a fan of Dead Space, it fits right in that vein and does it well. The characters were great, the information and lore you collect made sense, and none of the plot twists or happenings offended me in any way with bad writing. I ended up wanting more in the end, or some sort of replayability, as the game currently offers none, but yeah, I guess it is what it is. The story wasn't sappy, over-the-top stupid, or anything along those lines. I enjoyed what it offered, and it absolutely scratched that Dead Space itch, which is, I think, what they were going for. Hey, liking the video? Why don't you do us a favor and subscribe? We're trying to push a subscriber goal of 50,000 in 2023, and every single one helps. Don't forget to ring the bell too, since YouTube doesn't like to notify otherwise. Visually, I'm just gonna say this right now. The Callisto Protocol cranked up to Ultra with RTX enabled is the best looking game I have ever seen in my entire life. This isn't me playing it up. This is not an exaggeration. It is seriously the best looking game of 2022 without a doubt, and there's nothing that comes even close. It's not just one thing that looks visually impressive either. It's everything. It all just looks so unbelievably good, and this is coming from someone who thought there weren't going to be any major leaps or bounds in a visual sense in games to stand out this much for at least a few more years. The lighting is superb, easily the best I've ever seen. Just check out the scene with these helmet lights and how crazy good it makes Jacob look, with everything else being right up there with it. really good at this point.
Visor open.
That looks so good in the background. The lighting.
Helmet seal malfunction.
God, look at the reflections on his face. That's so good.
Oxygen levels critical.
I've never seen lights like that on someone's face in a game before. Like RTX wise, that's so f***ing insane.
Suit control.
That is so crazy looking. That's almost photorealistic. That's actually insane. The environments are all stupidly well detailed. The enemies are horrible, grotesque looking, and some of the best models I've ever seen. And every single facet of the world in this game in a visual sense is striking on max and ultra, and I just cannot stress that enough. It all lends to building a visual story to what's going on at every turn of every corner you make. And if it seriously doesn't get any awards in a visual capacity in the future, I'll just be shocked. Everything has clearly, in the visual sense, had so much work put into it, and the artists and the designers they had tasked with this completely knocked it out of the park. I know, this is on PC for me, but it made that much of an impression on me, and I know for a fact it still looks damn good on PS5 to boot. Not quite as good as PC, but still a super crazy good looking title there too. For anyone curious, the footage you're seeing has been recorded on a 3090 GPU and a 5950X processor with everything cranked up to 11 for effect post-patch, and I wasn't lagging. I will say there is still definitely a trade-off for having graphics this good, as you will struggle to maintain over 30 FPS if you're doing this on an older card, but without RTX on, the game does seem to maintain a solid 60 FPS on most rigs and setups post-patch, which to me is pretty solid. Audio too is superb in Callisto. The environment has so many sounds playing that are extremely important to pay attention to while you're navigating around, as so many of the enemies and ambushes have specific keynote sounds that you need to be able to pick up on. It's been a long time since I played a game that felt like I had to pay attention to the audio in, and at no point was I disappointed in the slightest with anything I heard. It all complemented the visuals so perfectly, almost in a cinematic way, and it just helped me get all the more immersed into all that was going on at any point in the game. The characters sound like real people, with extra care being added in for neat voice effects when they're wearing helmets and doing other things. Enemies sound truly grotesque, with all the gargles and wetness and grossness of their sounds just adding so much to the game whenever they were on screen. Huge props also have to be given for the combat impacts and generally everything in regard to dismembering, maiming, and destroying said enemies. The audio feedback was superb and went great with what I was seeing whenever I smashed a skull. Bravo. There wasn't much of the way of a soundtrack in Callisto though, and I will mention that much, but really with how this game is designed, I feel like oddly enough it would have impeded everything else going on. It has so much ambience and unsettling sounds that truly amp up what's going on while you play. Anything overriding that, like a soundtrack, those important audio cues that you're supposed to listen to, it would have been dampened by that, and I genuinely wouldn't have been on edge as much if there was a soundtrack playing all the time. So now let's talk about gameplay, starting with world exploration and flow. Callisto itself is a linear game. I'm not going to try to defend it as being anything other than that. You're on a very straight path that's laid out before you, which progresses plot as you move through areas. That, however, isn't to say that it doesn't reward exploration of the areas it chokeholds you through, as there are a lot of secrets to find and a good number of bonus gadgets and equipment that you will get if you take time to poke around. It's intuitive with how it hides these areas. It's always using the mechanics you've recently learned to hide these side areas, but then tucking them off to the side so they're not incredibly obvious. Just learned how to move crates? Explore this really dark corner and move this shelf to find one and move it to find a hidden vent. It's all well done. The game drops hints constantly that there's more in an area than what is directly shown to you, with pretty much every locked door I've ever found in exploration being a secret room that you gotta get into. It became second nature for me to see a red locked code door and go, I gotta get in there, feeling motivated to explore as the rewards were always worth it. Funnily enough, you can completely miss the shotgun pistol, for example, early on if you're not exploration oriented, as it's hidden in a side room, and there's multiple examples of stuff like this strewn about as you progress. This is just bonus loots. Ah, yeah, dude. I love bonus loots. Bonus loots? Skunk gun schematic. The fuck is a skunk gun? It feels very Dead Spacey in that regard, as the game did the same sort of things, letting you get weapons and equipment earlier for Isaac if you just took the time to look around rather than gunning straight for your objectives. Exploration will also get you jump scared. I wouldn't say that I was ever scared, like, you know, like I was gonna die horribly. Like, I got used to that once I got a handle of things, but they do love to hide eggs that explode on you or scrotum monsters that pop out around every corner. It never got old, and honestly, it's preventable if you're not rushing. It just really added to everything feeling compact and dense and full of life rather than open and empty, which is a problem we get in non-linear games these days. It was refreshing and well done in that regard to have a fairly linear path with small branches to go down. I enjoyed it immensely in that sense. Exploring will also get you lots of ammo and a ton of money, which I cannot stress enough is super important, as everything in the game only upgrades with money and you will need it to get stronger. Combat to me is great. Controversial opinion, I know, but I genuinely didn't dislike it in the slightest. I can understand wholeheartedly where the anger from the dodge system is derived from, as it's punishing, but if you spend enough time working on it like you would with a game, say like Sekiro and its parry system, you'll get the hang of it and it just feels so good once it clicks. To summarize it the best I can, the combat is an extremely intricate version of rock, paper, scissors. Every single enemy has a pattern and you gotta learn it. Enemy comes in to swing, you dodge. Enemy finishes combo, you strike. You never strike into them attacking, only dodge. Do you get what I mean? It sounds super simple on paper when I put it like that, but it doesn't mean that it is. It doesn't mean that it's not engaging or enjoyable either, as every single enemy is unique in how it behaves, but at its core, it's rock, paper, scissors. It feels so good once you figure out how to duck and weave enemy attacks. The kill animations when you deliver blows on enemies are wholly satisfying, and good God is it enjoyable to combo correctly after a dodge and rip enemies limb from limb, literally. What gets people upset though is that dodging is input direction based. You need to watch what arm they're using to attack you and where your closest enemy is attacking from to be able to dodge, and then dodge into said direction to avoid being hit. This means that if the enemy is swinging from the right, you dodge into it. Left, you dodge into it. It's a narrow window that you need skill to be able to hit, but it is entirely possible to just not take damage at all if you're good enough and patient enough to learn. I love this. I love how it really takes the old adage of talk shit, get hit literally if you think you're good and you're not. And my God, does this game like to kill you if you fail your dodges. If you mess up once or twice, you're dead, regardless of how armored you are, as even the simplest enemies hit like trucks and punish arrogance if you don't take your time. It's so methodical. You have to pace yourself in every fight and respect every single enemy in melee combat, and I love that. Just look at some of these clips of me fighting and dodging and you'll see just how good it can look when you do it right. I stopped him. Stop mutating! Stop mutating! This isn't to say you can't block, however, as that's incredibly possible and there's even upgrades to support it, but dodging is definitely the best way to play if you want to get better. Blocking is fun for smaller enemies and allows counters, but you'll always take some damage through it, and some bigger enemies genuinely just don't seem to care about your blocks and will throw you around like a ragdoll if you even try. It's all good, it's solid. I just think people need to get better at it or understand it as a rock, paper, scissors system, as I thought it was all positives and no negatives. Guns exist, of course, in Callisto, with a ton having different upgrades, and it's entirely possible for you to deal with most enemies without ever engaging in melee. Ammo is abundant, and you can craft more if you still run out, and every weapon sort of has this special upgrade alt fire that makes them even more potent. The default aiming is very Dead Space over the shoulder, with enemies having weak points you can exploit, such as blowing their legs off to make them crawl or removing their heads so they can't spit. It all makes sense. Where guns really shine though is when you combo them with the melee system, and the game wants you to do this. Several weapons, like the baton specifically, have upgrades that will allow you to instantly target and shoot enemies in a snapshot after a melee combo, disabling enemy special abilities in a lot of cases that would make fights way harder if you didn't. A great example of this is the mutation tentacle thing you encountered later. You need to shoot an enemy with a single round in center mass to stop them from mutating into a much harder version of themselves. If you shoot immediately after a combo, you stop this, and it kind of feels like Gunkata from the movie Equilibrium. There was nothing more satisfying than dismembering an enemy's arm and then legs, only to finish them with a comboed shotgun blast to the head. It was great, and I would recommend it. Thought that'd be it? Nope, you got force powers. These come in the kit of a glove that lets you throw things around with gravity, and believe me, I found this device incredibly useful and something you needed to learn how to use. The game is merciless in stacking numbers against you. Because every enemy is an actual threat, you need to get really good at instant killing and utilizing environments to destroy those threats, and this glove is just for that. It's really obvious the developers want and intend for you to use this to win in unfair situations, as Callisto, the planet, is OSHA's worst nightmare with all the fast spinning fans, meat grinders, and spike walls that exist everywhere. I had so much fun lifting enemies up and throwing them into walls to impale them after comboing another enemy in melee, and it never got old throwing harder enemies into meat grinders to instantly kill them and paint the entire area in blood. The upgrades only make this more powerful, eventually turning you into a god that can whip and throw mutated enemies around like they weigh nothing, and even splatter them into mist form from sheer force in the end. For anyone that's frustrated, you'll like it the more you practice. It's one of those games that is really hard if you try to rush in. Take things slow, take your time, and you'll enjoy these systems like I did, and I can seriously say that I didn't mind any of them in the slightest. They were all solid. I do want to take a moment to talk about the technical stability and bugs that Callisto has, and honestly, post-launch, I didn't find much of anything wrong on the PC version itself. I'm told the PS5 version runs really well too and doesn't have any issues, and since I never played the completely broken pre-patch version for more than an hour, I can't deduct too much from the overall score accordingly. I did crash twice in the 12-hour experience, but that might have been because I was alt-tabbing to talk to chat while streaming, and at no point did the game itself actually break or stop my progression in any sense. No bugs affected my gameplay or slowed down my progress, and everything worked as it should, which is really nice considering I just played Darktide, and I couldn't even do basic things in that without it breaking. That being said, let's break down my final scores on the Callisto protocol now. Gameplay gets a 9 out of 10. I freaking loved everything about it. Maybe I'm into misery simulation, or maybe the day one patches helped a ton, but I genuinely vibed with the game's flow and it felt good. Story gets a 7 out of 10. It's short, and there were times where I wanted to know more but couldn't, but it was solid for a game like this. None of the characters bothered me, and it didn't get preachy. Graphics and audio get a 10 out of 10. I'm not kidding, this is the best looking game I've ever played cranked to max, and the audio is right up there with it. I don't think we'll get another game that comes close visually for a while. Technical stability gets a 7 out of 10. I have to factor in the lower FPS on most systems if you want the game to look good, and the few crashes I've got, obviously, but overall it was stable and I never encountered any in-game bugs. And finally, value gets an 8 out of 10. I genuinely enjoyed my time with this game, but there's no replayability at all, and there's not even going to be a new game plus mode for some time until it's added in later as a patch. It's also pretty short for a full-priced game. All in all, that's going to lead me to give the Callisto Protocol an extremely strong 8 out of 10, and I feel like the New Game Plus mode would push it to a 9 when it's out, especially if they go and add harder difficulties and maybe even bonus content areas. I don't know. It's a hard game. You need to go in with patience and either have a decent PC or play on a console to truly enjoy it, but it's a good game in my opinion. I know my experience seems to be a lot different than other day one reviewers, but that's because I waited, I believe, and most of their issues at this point have been resolved. I joked about calling it originally the Callisto Broke to Call or something like that, but it just really isn't that right now, and I can absolutely suggest this game to anyone who enjoyed Dead Space or just wants to have a visually stunning experience where you die over and over again to enjoy. that's going to be it for this review. Thanks for watching. Do all the things you would normally do, like subscribing, liking the video, and sharing it with people. Please, for the love of God, help us. And leave a comment down below about your experiences with the game. Who knows, maybe I got stupid lucky and avoided some major issues. Let me know, please. And until the next video, this is Delrith, and I'll be seeing you. Bye.